So I'm going to describe a certain type of filmmaker, and if you fit that description, then you'll want to stick around for this video because I think you'll find it super helpful. So this is a filmmaker who owns a camera, maybe even two. They have a mix of primes and zoom lenses and aren't really sure which ones they prefer. They like the freedom of shooting handheld, but they also like staging cinematic shots with their slider or gimbal, two things that they thought they would use more of when they originally bought them. They own a basic lighting kit and some modifiers, nothing too fancy, but it gets the job done in most situations. Over the years, they've shot a few weddings, some live events, and some generic corporate promo videos. They market themselves as a videographer in order to generate income, but they don't necessarily want to be known as a videographer. They can't quite shake the feeling that the people hiring them see them as generic and easily replaceable camera operators, instead of somebody with a unique vision and style. They have the tools, the skills, and the knowledge to create really beautiful and compelling stories, but they don't know where to start or how to get the ball rolling. Now, if you could relate to any of that, then it means that we have a lot in common, because for the longest time, that is how I saw myself. Now, what you're seeing on screen are clips from a short documentary that I uploaded to YouTube a little over a month ago about a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor who runs a gym in the town that I live in. Now, there are some fantastic short films on YouTube, and compared to those, this one isn't really that special. But for me, this project represents finally taking control of my work and breaking that cycle I felt that I was trapped in of just being another generic camera guy for hire. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down all of the elements that went into creating that project, from coming up with the idea, reaching out to the people involved, shooting, lighting, editing, storyboarding, sound design, and just what my thought process was at the time of making all of these decisions. I'll link to the video in that description if you want to pause and quickly watch it. It's only a few minutes long, and it might help provide more context for this video. So the first thing you'll obviously want to figure out is who is your subject and what is your story. And the best thing to do is really just look in your own backyard. You'll find a story worth telling if you take the time to look for it. I'd start with finding something or somebody that interests you. I'm not really a fan of watching mixed martial arts, and I'm not a student of this gym, nor have I ever taken a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class. But the owner of the gym, Sean, is somebody who I found fascinating because of how dedicated he is to the sport. He spends 100% of his waking life in that world. He's very intense and very passionate about what he does, and I found that interesting because I wanted to explore why he is the way he is. I have a lot of experience just cold messaging people from my first feature-length doc. It was awkward at first, but it got easier the more I did it. I know that whole process can seem a little intrusive at first, but just remember that it's all part of the process. If you're struggling to get over that mental roadblock of DMing a stranger and asking if you could make a film about them, don't worry, I got you. Here are a few things to keep in mind. At the end of the day, I really think that most people just want to be helpful. We want to be heard, and we inherently yearn for genuine human interaction. Small talk and mundane office banter doesn't really cut it, but outside of family and friends, that's pretty much how we interact with people we encounter. Life can feel pretty mundane at times, but I like to think that everybody has something in their life that drives them. A passion project, a hobby, or an activity that they enjoy, a skill they're trying to master, that sort of thing. In my case, for example, I've been feeding a sourdough starter that I first made back in 2019. And yes, I did do that before the pandemic made it cool. I really love baking sourdough bread, and if you talk to me about it when you're around me, I'll probably never shut up about it. Now let's imagine instead of doing it for 5 years, I had been doing it for 20 years. If somebody wanted me to be the subject of a documentary they were making about sourdough bread, I'd be flattered and I'd want to help them. I'd jump at the chance to share my hobby and passions with others, and I would genuinely look forward to it because it would be a nice break from the normal everyday life. So whenever you're reaching out to somebody, just resist the urge to think that you're inconveniencing them. In fact, you are better off removing phrases like "sorry to bother you" or "if it's not too much trouble" from your lexicon entirely. Just lead with confidence and know that they are getting as much value out of this exchange as you are. Now, I'm somebody who's been shooting wedding videos for a while, and at this point I've got a pretty good eye for what works and what doesn't. I've built up the muscle memory for wedding days, and I'm able to pretty confidently walk into a new location and figure out how to get the shots I want. Projects like the ones I'm talking about right now are similar but different. This video was shot over the course of 4 different days, and of those 4 days, 2 of them were more planned in the sense that I came prepared with specific shots I knew I would want to get. Ones that involved setting up lights in a certain way or had a certain kind of framing that I wanted to get. I had an idea for the look and vibe I wanted for this video, and to help build the shot list I wanted, I looked to YouTube and Vimeo for inspiration. I found a bunch of cinematic shorts other people had created, not just on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu but on other sports like basketball, running, and boxing. Since I knew the video I wanted to make was going to have shots with higher contrast and negative fill, I saved those videos to a playlist and then took screenshots of the frames I liked, and then added them to a mood board. From there, I looked at the location we'd be filming, and I planned out how I could adapt the elements I liked about those screenshots to the shooting location. Okay, so now I've got a mood board and a good idea of the shots I want to get. On the first day of shooting, I scheduled all the shots that involved setting up lights and reflectors just to get the hard stuff out of the way. I also staged the main sparring match between Sean and one of his students. I knew I wanted to get clips of someone getting slammed into the mat, and that was the very first thing I did. I used a longer lens and got some tight sparring shots before switching to a wider angle. Sean's gym doesn't have any windows, so I propped the door open and used a softbox to fill in more light. The open door really was the best angle, so I shot pretty much all of the sparring this way. After that, I got some solo stuff of just Sean, like clips of him warming up, stretching, putting on his gi, that sort of thing. I didn't really change the lighting for this. I had the light coming in from the open door, plus the Godox SL150 and a softbox to help lift the shadows. Once that was done, I set up for a few hero shots of Sean, the first of which was him looking down and then straight up at the lens. For this, I put the softbox directly to his right side and created a harsh line down the center of his face. If you really want to dissect the shot, you might say that I did this to show the duality of Sean's life. Somebody with a dark and troubled past contrasted with the person he is today. Someone who's driven and full of life. I really did it because I thought it looked moody and dramatic, but I like the first option better, so let's go with that. After that, I did this shot of him sitting on the bench deep in thought while wrapping his finger. The bench that he's sitting on is normally flat against the wall like most benches usually are, but for this shot I pulled it out a few feet and moved it right in front of the doorway. The key light was placed on his right side and I used a bounce to lift the shadows ever so slightly on his opposite side. Then I used the Zhiyun 5-array LED in the change room to add some depth. And then finally the shot of Sean on the exercise bike, which was just 2 LED lights, one set to blue as a backlight and the other set to pink coming from the side because I just thought it looked cool. I don't own a ton of lights or modifiers and my lighting skills are pretty basic, but this just goes to show that a little bit goes a long way. The last shot of the day was him doing the cold plunge. I didn't actually know he had one until he mentioned it to me after we finished shooting. We weren't doing any audio that day, so I left all my lavs at home, but luckily I did have my Comica shotgun microphone on my rig, because that cold plunge made for a really cool cold open.
A lot of people, I think it's because I had a rough life as a kid and I never, all my parents have died. A lot of my family never did anything with their life. So it's this kind of trying to prove to everybody that I'm not a loser. It's really weird why I do it.
The second day of filming took place at the beach, and luckily Sean was pretty flexible with times in the evenings, so I was able to wait and choose a day that had the nicest sunset. I asked him to repeat a few warm-ups that he did in the gym, plus a few other shots just to get some variety. There's a long set of stairs that are popular for people to run up, so I got Sean to go up and down a few sections. We experimented with a few different angles, and we really just did whatever felt best. One shot that I really liked was one where I was following down the stairs as the sun kept peeking out from behind his torso. I used a quarter black mist filter to reduce the contrast a bit and add a subtle glow to the highlights. The only planned shot I had for the beach was this silhouetted hero pose here, which involved a tripod. Everything else was just done handheld on the fly. And as much as I'm not a fan of using them, I did bust out the gimbal with the Sony a7 III for a few jogging shots along the boardwalk, even though I ended up only using a few seconds of them in the final edit. Day 3 of filming was just one of the adult classes, and that was pretty straightforward. I told Sean to just do his thing, and I would run around trying to be as unobtrusive as possible. No real game plan here except for waiting to get this one key shot of the class lined up along the wall with Sean framed right in the center. After the class was finished, I used a portable slider to help get some establishing shots of his gym. I brought one of my LED lights with me just in case, and it came in handy when I was getting this shot right here. I was able to place it underneath the lettering and make this flat wall a bit more interesting. The master interview was done at the very end, and that was intentional because now I had gotten to know Sean a bit more, and I had a better idea of the types of questions I was going to ask him and how to guide the interview. We were strapped for a location, so we filmed it in his garage, which also doubles as a home gym. I used the Pocket 6K with the Sigma 18-35 for the A cam and the Sony a7 III with the Sigma 50-100 as the B cam. It wasn't the best location, but when in doubt, a tight shot with the shadows falling towards the camera usually does the trick. I had a key light on the same side as the window in the background, just so the motivated light source made sense, and a bounce filling in the shadows to reduce contrast. Once everything was shot, I brought it into DaVinci Resolve and started piecing together clips from the interview and Cold Plunge. Once my rough assembly edit was done, I went through again and fine-tuned the audio, got rid of all the ums and ahs, shortened the pauses, and just made everything tighter so it flowed nicer. Then after I do all this, I go through and introduce story beats that I like to emphasize using things like bass hits and other sound effects. Remember in that last step where I tighten up everything? Well, during this step, I actually do the opposite and I add gaps in between certain clips to help punch up certain parts. Here's an example.
I have a lot of people that look up to me, like my kids. I want my kids to know, like, I never give up. When they're older, they'll know that I put it on the line, and hopefully it gives them some courage.
When you download a song from a music subscription service, you'll usually be able to download something called a stem, which is basically the song but broken down into its individual instruments. This is nice because you can keep the sounds you like and leave out the ones you don't. Downloading the stem let me use exactly what I needed, and also use certain sounds at different parts. In the full track, the bass kicks in later, and with the stem, I was able to bring it in much earlier. Then I was able to time it with the silhouetted hero shot I referenced before.
I have a lot of people that look up to me, like my kids. I want my kids to know, like, I never give up. When they're older, they'll know that I put it on the line, and hopefully it gives them some courage.
I also thought that the part with the bass hit needed a bit more of a build-up rather than just going from one shot to the next. I chose a few frames from a bunch of different clips and made this sort of rapid-fire transition thing.
I have a lot of people that look up to me, like my kids. I want my kids to know, like, I never give up. When they're older, they'll know that I put it on the line, and hopefully...
It was already looking good, but it was still missing a few things. I went on Soundstripe, which is the subscription service I use, and I found this file under sound design called PromoPad76. I guess promo pads are these pre-built multi-purpose sound design clips. I found one that sounded cool and I just timed it with the build-up and I got this.
I have a lot of people that look up to me, like my kids. I want my kids to know, like, I never give up. When they're older, they'll know that I put it on the line, and hopefully...
The final part I added were these overlay effects that I got from a promotion that Tropic Color was running. I just brought the whole clip into my timeline, dropped it over the transition I made, and it ended up working pretty well. Here's the final result.
I have a lot of people that look up to me, like my kids. I want my kids to know, like, I never give up. When they're older, they'll know that I put it on the line, and hopefully it gives them...
So once the assembly edit is done and my beats have been added, I'll go through and just add in all the B-roll. This part just takes a lot of time, so stick with it long enough until you hit your flow state. Once I'm happy with it, I'll go through and add any sound design, like the one I mentioned, plus any sound effects needed for like live in-camera sound. The only ones I needed to add for this video were the one of the door opening and the room tone of the studio. So once that's done and the sound levels have been mixed, I'll move on to color grading. I'm by no means a color grading expert, and I normally just use 3 or 4 nodes on a clip. The first one is just a basic color transform from B-Raw or S-Log into something a bit more normal that I could work with. The second node is where I adjust the blacks, highlights, contrast, etc. while making sure to stay within the threshold of my waveform monitor. I have a library of creative LUTs I like to use, and I'll apply that on the third node and then slightly tweak the colors from there if needed. On this specific clip right here, I actually added a fourth node where I made a layer mask to isolate Sean's face, and then I made adjustments to it without affecting the rest of the image. I'll toggle it on and off so you can see the difference. Here it is with the node, and here it is without. Okay, so that's basically how I go about making videos. I really just wanted this to be an overview of where my head was at during pre-production all the way to post-production, and why I chose to do things a certain way. If you want me to go over any specific aspects of the video in more detail, just let me know in the comments or reach out to me on Instagram and I'll be happy to chat. Hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.